Schools of education throughout the University of North Carolina prepare many of the teachers that work with public school students across our state. That's why our next guest's latest research is so important and also disturbing. Jay Schalin is Director of Policy Analysis at the James G. Martin Center for Academic Renewal, and the title of that research report is The Politicization of University Schools of Education, The Long March Through the Education Schools. Welcome back to the program, Jay.
Thanks, Mitch. Thanks for having me.
So you're looking at something that people thinking about education schools might not think about, and that is not how we're teaching our students or how we're teaching our teachers, but the politics involved. Why is this something that you wanted to look into?
Well, we've been aware of it for quite some time. I mean, one of the problems with education schools is they sort of fall between the cracks. A lot of people tend to analyze and look at and critique the actual K-12 education systems, and at the same time they look at universities. But education schools are where the ideas from academia get kind of put through the meat grinder and developed into something that gets used in the K-12 system. And a lot of these ideas, as anybody familiar with academia would understand, are not always the best for the country.
And your report suggests that there's a lot of politics involved in these ideas and how they get filtered to these future teachers in our schools.
Without a doubt. There has long been a push to make our schools a vehicle to rechange society, and this goes back all the way to at least the early 1900s. The progressive era had all kinds of different schemes in which they were going to recreate America through the education system. And they weren't always overtly political, but what they did is they kind of scraped out all the traditional Americanism out of the school systems and leave it open for a much more radical group to come through. And this is not, on one hand, it's a very organic thing. On another thing, some people have directly targeted our education systems for politicization for a long time.
Now, you have a very thorough report. We're only going to barely scratch the surface, but what did you look into and what did you find?
Well, one thing I tried to do is I tried to look at the genesis of how it became politicized. It went through, as I said, the progressive era. Then it went through a process where, and it really didn't affect the schools initially, but the idea of cultural Marxism, in which you were no longer going to overtake the country through a revolution of the proletariat, and you were going to overtake it through the education system and popular culture. And one of the most important, or one of the most dramatic processes that came out of that was the multicultural movement, in which many of the politicized methods are implemented in our schools.
In looking at the schools that you did for this research, is this an issue that has gotten worse over time?
It's much worse. I think anybody who is aware of what's going on today, just reading the daily newspapers, every once in a while you're going to see some outrageous incident of something like where in the Seattle school system they're starting to introduce, or for a while they've been introducing children to transgenderism even as early as kindergarten. These kinds of things appear all the time. You know, they appear in one school district here and something else appears in another. Fairly recently, in the last year, I think the Wake counties looked at a system of changing the way they discipline students to have fewer suspensions because there has been such a racial imbalance in the number of suspensions. And they claim that this is unfairly hurting the students who are punished because they're not in school. But to do anything else may unfairly hurt the better behaved students, because now they have disruptive students in the classroom more. So there's there's the outrage of the week, and I expect it to get worse and worse and worse.
We are chatting with Jay Schalin. He is Director of Policy Analysis at the James G. Martin Center for Academic Renewal. The research report we're discussing is called The Politicization of University Schools of Education. Jay, I'm guessing that as you did this research, it didn't really surprise you because you've been following this issue for a while, but were there any things that you found that you said, even I didn't know it was this bad?
No, but that's because I expected the worst. My main method, and which I've used in other areas as well, was to look at course syllabi for the books and articles that are assigned to education school students, and I pretty much found what I expected, that a large share of the books the books and articles being used in education schools are heavily politicized. Not all. I looked at 3 different schools, the University of Michigan, the University of North Carolina, and the University of Wisconsin. And Michigan actually was much less politicized, at least overtly, than the other 2 were. But I looked at the syllabi and to discover, who the most frequently assigned authors are. And the single most is a woman named Gloria Ladson-Billings, who is a critical race theorist. And the line I quote from her is from Marcus Garvey, the Back to Africa guy, and she said that education schools should be all race all the time. I might not have that quote exactly right, but something along those lines. So that's the single most assigned author across all 3 of these education schools.
Well, if that isn't disturbing enough in and of itself, in the brief amount of time that we have left, for folks who are not going to be able to read through the whole report and just want to get kind of the bottom line message, what is it that you hope people will get out of this research?
The one thing that changing the education schools is imperative. And if it can't be done, and I wonder if it can be done, then we have to start looking for ways around them. Because as children, as the education system goes, so goes the next generation. And we're seeing things like very favorable attitudes towards socialism in the new generation. And this is, and other things. Many of the students have a negative look at the United States. And this is something that's being directly pushed in our schools of education and then down into the K-12 system.